Michael Lang had been awake for 72 hours straight. It was Monday morning, August 18th, 1969. The sun was already climbing over Max Yasgur's farm in Bethel, New York. The field that had held 500,000 people just 2 days ago was now mostly empty. Mud everywhere. Trash scattered across acres. Abandoned tents, sleeping bags, blankets left behind by people who'd finally gone home. Lang stood backstage at the main stage, watching his crew dismantle equipment. He was 24 years old and had just produced the largest music festival in history. But he didn't feel victorious. He felt hollow. The festival was supposed to end Sunday night. It hadn't. Technical delays, weather problems, too many artists, too many songs. The schedule had collapsed. Bands that were supposed to play Saturday played Sunday. Sunday acts pushed to Monday morning. By Sunday midnight, maybe 400,000 people had been there. By Monday morning at 7 a.m., most of them were gone. Lang walked through the backstage area. Musicians were sleeping on equipment cases, on the ground, anywhere they could find space. The weekend had been chaos. Beautiful chaos, but still chaos. 3 days of peace and music had turned into 3 days of panic and improvisation. Someone touched his shoulder. It was Jimi Hendrix. Jimi looked tired. He'd been waiting all weekend to close the festival. That was the plan. Jimi Hendrix would be the final act, the ultimate closer for the ultimate event. But the schedule kept shifting. Saturday became Sunday, Sunday became Monday, and now it was Monday morning and most of the audience was gone. "We still on?" Jimi asked quietly. Lang looked out at the field. Maybe 30,000 people were still there. Maybe, scattered across an area designed to hold 20 times that many. It looked empty. It felt empty. "Man," Lang said, running his hand through his hair. "You missed it. Saturday night, there were 400,000 people out there. The whole hillside was packed. You could barely see the grass. Now it's just..." He gestured toward the field. The mud, the emptiness, the few thousand stubborn souls who'd stayed through the night, sleeping in the rain, waiting for Jimi. "Maybe we should cancel," Lang said. The words came out before he'd thought them through. "This isn't what we planned. This isn't worth it." Jimi was quiet for a moment. He looked out at the field, at the empty spaces, at the mud, at the morning light hitting the few remaining people who were stirring awake. "How many are still out there?" Jimi asked. "I don't know," Lang said. 30,000? Maybe less?" Jimi nodded slowly. "That's 30,000 reasons to play." Lang started to respond, but Jimi was already walking toward the stage. The crew was confused. Half the equipment was being broken down. Nobody expected Jimi to actually perform. It was 9 a.m. on a Monday morning. The festival was over. Everyone knew it was over, but Jimi started setting up his rig. His band, Gypsy Sun and Rainbows, assembled quietly. No announcement was made. No fanfare. Just Jimi plugging in his white Stratocaster, adjusting his amp, checking his sound. Lang stood at the side of the stage watching. He felt something shift in his chest. Guilt, maybe, or shame. He'd almost canceled. He'd almost sent Jimi home without playing. He'd almost prioritized numbers over music. The few thousand people in the field noticed movement on stage. Word spread quickly through the remaining crowd. Jimi Hendrix. Actually playing. After waiting all weekend, the people who'd stayed were going to see him. They moved closer to the stage. Not running, just walking through the mud, gathering, forming a small crowd in front of an enormous empty field. Jimi started playing. He opened with a few songs. The crowd responded, but their voices sounded small in the vast space. Lang could hear individual people screaming. That's how sparse the audience was. In a normal concert, crowd noise blends into a roar. Here you could pick out single voices. Then Jimi played the Star-Spangled Banner. Lang had heard the national anthem 1,000 times. At baseball games, school assemblies, every public event in America, it was background music, ritual, something you stood for and then forgot. What Jimi played was not that. He started with the melody, recognizable, traditional. The opening notes were clean, almost respectful. "Oh, say, can you see?" The familiar phrase hung in the morning air. For a moment, it was just the anthem, just the song every American knew. Then Jimmy's fingers found the tremolo bar. The first bend was subtle, just a slight wavering in the note, like heat rising off pavement. But it was enough. That small distortion opened a door. Through that door came everything else. He began bending strings, stretching them past their natural tension. The guitar screamed. Not metaphorically, it actually screamed. Lang felt the sound in his chest, in his throat, like something physical trying to escape his body. Jimmy's hands moved across the fretboard with surgical precision. He knew exactly what sound he was creating. This wasn't chaos. This was composition. Each scream, each burst of feedback, each impossible sound was intentional. The guitar became helicopter blades, that distinctive whop, whop, whop sound that every American recognized from news footage. Jimmy created it with the tremolo bar and his pick hand, alternating between muted strings and open notes. The rhythm was perfect, hypnotic, terrifying. Then came the bombs. The tremolo bar went down, all the way down, and the pitch dropped like something falling from the sky. Impact, feedback explosion, silence. Then another drop, another explosion. Jimmy was playing an air raid. Lang watched Jimmy's face. His eyes were closed. His body swayed slightly. He wasn't performing. He was channeling. Something was moving through him, using him as a vessel, translating invisible horror into audible truth. Feedback turned into air raid sirens. Jimmy let the notes sustain until they fed back through the amplifier, creating that rising wail that meant take cover, that meant incoming, that meant death from above. He controlled the feedback with his body position, moving closer to the amp and away from it, conducting the scream. He bent strings until they sounded like soldiers screaming. The high E string bent up a full step, then another half step, stretching until it was almost breaking, creating a pitch that sounded human. Sounded like pain. Sounded like the last sound someone makes before they stop making sounds forever. Jimmy made the Stratocaster cry. Not the blues cry, not the rock and roll cry. The actual human cry. The sound of grief compressed into electricity and wire. He was playing Vietnam. Every note was a translation. Television couldn't show what war actually felt like. But Jimmy was making you feel it. The confusion, the violence, the way beauty and horror existed in the same moment. Between the chaos, the melody would resurface. Those familiar notes, by the dawn's early light. A reminder of what the song was supposed to mean, what the country was supposed to be. And then Jimmy would destroy it again, showing the gap between symbol and reality, between what we say we are and what we actually do. Lang stood frozen at the side of the stage. This wasn't entertainment. This wasn't performance. This was something else entirely. Jimmy was translating death into music, channeling the war happening on the other side of the world into 6 strings and an amplifier. The melody would emerge from the chaos occasionally, a reminder of what the anthem was supposed to be, what America was supposed to be. Then Jimmy would destroy it again, pull it apart, show the violence underneath the patriotic veneer. Lang felt tears on his face. He wasn't sure when he'd started crying. He'd spent 3 days managing logistics, sound problems, weather delays, crowd control, medical emergencies, operating in crisis mode, solving problems, making decisions, moving forward. He hadn't felt anything, couldn't afford to feel anything. Now he felt everything. His throat was tight, his chest ached. The music was doing something to him that he didn't understand and couldn't control. Around him, the crew had stopped working. Everyone backstage was watching. Some were crying too. Others stood with mouths open, stunned. Out in the field, the 30,000 people who'd stayed stood completely still. Nobody danced. Nobody sang along. They just listened, witnessing something they couldn't name, but couldn't look away from. Jimmy played for 4 minutes. When he finished, there was silence. Not the silence of an unimpressed crowd, the silence of people who just experienced something too big for immediate reaction. The kind of silence that follows a car accident or a birth or a death. The silence of minds trying to process what they just witnessed. Then someone started clapping. Slowly, others joined. Not wild applause, Respectful applause. The kind of applause that says, "I just saw something I'll tell my children about." Jimi finished his set. When he walked off stage, he passed Lang without saying anything. Their eyes met briefly. Jimi nodded. Lang nodded back. Later that day, as the festival officially ended and the remaining crowd dispersed, Lang sat alone in the mud. His festival was over. Woodstock had happened. It had been messy, chaotic, nothing like the plan, and somehow it had worked. But the moment he kept returning to was Monday morning. Jimi playing to an empty field. Jimi choosing to play when Lang had suggested canceling. In the years that followed, Woodstock became legendary. The footage was edited, the performances packaged, the story told and retold until it became myth. Jimi's Star-Spangled Banner became the defining image of the festival, of the era, of a generation's relationship with war and patriotism. But the footage never showed how empty the field was. The cameras focused on Jimi, on the few thousand people close to the stage. They created the illusion of a massive crowd. Most people who saw the film thought Jimi played to 500,000 people. Lang never corrected them, but he knew. In 2019, for the 50th anniversary of Woodstock, Lang gave an interview to Rolling Stone. The journalist asked about the festival's highlight. Lang didn't hesitate. "Monday morning," he said. "Jimi playing to 30,000 people in the mud at 9 a.m. The journalist looked confused. "But wasn't Sunday night the peak? When the crowd was biggest?" Lang shook his head. "The crowd was biggest Saturday night. By Monday morning, almost everyone was gone. That's when Jimi played." "Why is that the highlight?" Lang took a long breath. "Because that's when I understood what Woodstock was actually about. I thought it was about numbers. 500,000 people. Biggest crowd ever. That's what made it historic. But when Jimi insisted on playing for 30,000 people in an empty field, when he refused to cancel, when he played the anthem like that, to that small crowd, in that moment I realized something." "What?" "400,000 people were at Woodstock," Lang said, his voice quiet. "But only 30,000 saw Woodstock. The ones who stayed. The ones who were there Monday morning in the mud. Those were the people who actually got it. And Jimi knew that. He didn't care about the crowd size. He cared about playing for the people who cared enough to stay." The journalist wrote this down, then asked, "Do you think Jimi knew how important that performance would become?" Lang looked out the window of his office, seeing something beyond the walls. "I think Jimi wasn't playing for importance. He wasn't playing for history. He was playing for 30,000 cold, muddy, exhausted kids who'd waited 3 days to see him. That's what made it important. That's what made it history." "You said he made you cry." Lang nodded. "I was crying because I'd almost sent him home. I'd almost canceled because I thought an empty field meant failure. Jimi showed me that an empty field just means you're playing for the people who chose to be there. And those are the only people who matter." When Jimi died a year later in September 1970, Lang didn't attend the funeral. He couldn't. The grief was too large. But he went back to Max Yasgur's farm. He stood in the field where the stage had been. It was empty again, just grass and mud and memory. He thought about Monday morning, about suggesting they cancel, about Jimi saying, 30,000 reasons to play. Michael Lang had been awake for 72 hours straight that weekend. He'd produced the largest music festival in history. He'd created a cultural moment that defined a generation. But the moment that defined him, the moment that taught him what music actually was, happened on a Monday morning in an empty field when Jimi Hendrix played the national anthem to 30,000 people who'd chosen to stay. That was Woodstock. Not the crowd, not the numbers, not the myth, the truth.